America's most scenic drives. Join us in the eastern United States as we venture along our nation's most magnificent highways and byways. The open road beckons, and together we'll see and do it all. From Maine's inspiring mountains to the emerald seas of Florida's Keys and every wondrous place in between. You'll explore picturesque New England towns and stop at magnificent lighthouses and endless stretches of sandy beach. Then it's off to New Hampshire and Vermont for the very peak of foliage season. On this trip, you'll always be in the right place at the right time. Ride to the base of Niagara Falls. Roll through Pennsylvania's Amish country and marvel at nature's wonders in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. And your adventures have only just begun. You'll watch the fabled pony swim on Chincoteague Island, float aboard a paddle boat on the Mississippi, and explore places where few others have ever gone. On this journey of a lifetime, all you need to bring is a spirit of adventure. So leave your worries behind and let us do the driving. The first adventure begins on Maine's seacoast, tracing along Route 1 from Portland to Acadia National Park. Setting out early, the morning mist still shrouds the Maine coast. On this wild and craggy shoreline, the weather can change in the blink of an eye. The fog lifts with the rising sun. And upon reaching Pemaquid Point, the skies are a deep blue. A short hike leads up to one of the most scenic beacons on the East Coast. First lit in 1835, the Pemaquid Lighthouse is one of a string alerting sailors to steer clear of the rocky coastline. Back on the road, quaint villages like Camden and Belfast pass by. In the mid-1800s, these sleepy towns were the shipbuilding heart of America. They coursed with energy and industry, supplying the vessels and men that crossed the globe in trade with China and Europe. A little further north, and the roads hug craggy outcroppings and pass through dark green forests of pine and spruce. In the heart of this beautiful land lies Acadia National Park. Acadia covers some 46,000 acres, including roughly half of stunning Mount Desert Island. Incredibly, these coves and inlets were carved by glaciers during the last ice age 12,000 years ago, leaving behind the only fjord on America's east coast, as well as a lovely coastline. And today, the ocean waves continue where the glaciers left off. Each breaker erodes a tiny bit more from the seemingly unyielding granite. Further along the road at Thunder Hole, the true fury of the ocean is revealed. Here, waves rush into a natural channel and crash into the rocks. Still, hardy souls brave the seas off Mount Desert Island for their living. Each day, in all sorts of weather, this lobsterman pulls hundreds of traps from the frigid Maine waters. These lobsters will be off to market in a matter of hours. Buoys proudly display their owner's individuality. Each lobsterman marks his traps with his own unique design. Lobsters are practically a required meal on any tour of Acadia. But Maine offers other delicacies that are just as irresistible. Little roadside stands beckon, especially at the height of blueberry season. Maine blueberries grow wild on the hillsides, and their rich fruit combines the sweet and tang that characterize this land. Deeper into Acadia National Park, the road leads up to Cadillac Mountain. It is the highest point on the entire eastern seaboard and affords fantastic views. Below lies Frenchman Bay, named for the area's first settlers. Almost 300 years ago, French frigates hid in these waters, waiting to ambush their English rivals. Visitors now search the waters for different but equally elusive characters. Whales, finback, which can be 84 feet in length, and humpback whales that pass off of Mount Desert Island during their seasonal migrations. But only part of Acadia rests along the ocean. Follow almost any road, and it will lead to great places to get out of the car and explore on foot. It's not hard to find a quiet corner. Acadia has 120 miles of hiking trails. Many of which lead to serene mountain ponds, peaceful spots abounding with life. Much of the park can be reached with just a short walk. But for those who don't feel like hoofing it, there are other options. Carriage roads lace much of the park. Trotting along at a leisurely pace, you can get a sense of what it must have been like during America's Gilded Age, when families like the Rockefellers and Morgans vacationed here. On the northeastern edge of Acadia stands the town of Bar Harbor. This was the resort of choice for America's elite at the turn of the 20th century. Fortunately, some of the finest mansions can still be enjoyed today. They are the survivors of the catastrophic 1947 fire that destroyed many magnificent Bar Harbor homes. This mansion contains 42 rooms. Amazingly, mansions like this were known to their owners as cottages. But there was nothing rustic about them. This 1910 mansion has been lovingly restored and maintained down to the finest detail. There's no better way to end a long day on the road than this. Settling into a comfortable chair and relaxing with a good book. The sun sets on this magical land, marking the end to a glorious day. Our next journey is one of surf and sun, carrying us from quaint Nantucket Island to the sandy shores of Cape Cod at the height of summer. Nantucket lies 30 miles from the Massachusetts coast. The Wampanoag tribe called this island Land Far Out to Sea. First settled by Europeans in 1659, the cobblestoned Maine town retains all the charm of New England's bygone times. In the early 19th century, Nantucket's sailing fleet dominated the whaling business. Today, few places can rival the beauty of its flower-bedecked cottages. Nantucket's small streets and back roads are still a place where neighbors stop to chat. And there's no better way to explore than on a bike. Paths and bike-friendly roads lace the island. 14 miles long and 3.5 wide, it's easy to explore much of this crescent-shaped island on bike or foot. But more beaches await at the next destination. Ferries shuttle back and forth to Cape Cod. White clapboard towns like Brewster, Truro, and Provincetown skirt the ocean. Even the churches reflect how lives along this coast are linked forever to the sea. Past Cape Cod's saltwater marshes, a veritable mountain range of dunes, and hidden paths that lead through dune grasses, you'll discover endless stretches of gorgeous beach. The perfect place to go fly a kite or build a sandcastle. Strong tides shift these sandy beaches, creating unusual spits and jetties. But there is one constant along the coast. This lighthouse anchors the shoreline like an ancient lifeguard perched on the cliff above. In 1716, Boston merchants demanded a lighthouse to protect their wares from the treacherous seas. The Boston Lighthouse was the first in America, but many others were soon to follow. Today, they serve as a reminder of New England's seafaring past. Each has its own special appeal, from the quaint Highland beacon to the decommissioned Sentinel at Harding Beach. to the towering candy-striped Nauset Lighthouse. For now, though, the seas are calm. With the setting sun comes the end of another glorious day. It's time to reel in the last catch. A full moon rises over the water, signaling the end to this tour of the magnificent New England coast. The next leg of the journey leads us to an even more quintessentially New England scene. It travels from Franconia Notch in New Hampshire to Bennington, Vermont during one of nature's greatest fall displays. The journey begins in Franconia Notch in northern New Hampshire, where there's already a chill in the air. New Hampshire is known as the Granite State. This 40-foot-high rock formation is called the Old Man in the Mountain because it resembles a human profile. The American author Nathaniel Hawthorne used it as the inspiration for his story, The Great Stone Face. But every year, one of the most dramatic transformations imaginable occurs here, the spectacular foliage of autumn. Maple, oak, and birch forests paint these valleys. To get a real sense of this splendor, climb out of the car and set out on foot. The warm days and long, cool nights of New England's autumn are said to produce these uniquely brilliant and radiant hues. From above, the hillsides look as if they've caught fire, the scattered scarlets and gold standing out against the cool blue sky and green pines. In the heart of New Hampshire stand the White Mountains. Here, an old-fashioned cog railway has carried passengers since 1869 up and down Mount Washington, the tallest peak in the entire Northeast. For P.T. Barnum, this breathtaking ride was part and parcel of what he called the second greatest show on earth. Heading west into Vermont, we drive through such quaint towns as Stowe, Newfane, and Bennington. Newfane is a charming village of clapboard houses and steepled churches, all set around a quiet town common. The way of life seems more informal, and the only ones wearing ties are scarecrows. The stores stock local specialties like fudge, maple syrup, and handmade crafts. For almost 250 years, people have farmed these valleys and hills, improving the land. And some still carry on the traditional ways. Old-fashioned equipment produces a drink always found in New England in the fall: fresh apple cider. A drive down one of Vermont's many quiet byways takes in some of the most beautiful autumn foliage of all. The locals enjoy the last warm autumn days before the harsh New England winter settles in. This sleigh is a reminder that the first snowfall lies just around the corner. One last look down a country lane fringed by an orange carpet of leaves, and then back on the road. Next stop, one of the masterpieces of nature that simply can't be missed. As you approach, small rapids hint at what lies ahead. Niagara Falls. The air grows misty. The ground seems to rumble. The Niagara River links Lake Erie with Lake Ontario and divides America from Canada. It is a place of unrivaled force and raw energy. Close to 1 million gallons of water flow over the falls every minute, then plunge more than 170 feet to the river below. Dozens have attempted to ride over the rapids in barrels or small boats. But vessels like this, made of the mist, offer better ways to get a closer look. Sailing directly into the torrent, everything fades into the mist for a minute. Then, Horseshoe Falls appears. Back on the shore, visitors in yellow slickers venture into the mist. They cling to the pedestrian bridge on Goat Island. With tons of water crashing headfirst just inches from their faces, they've gotten close enough to Niagara's epic power. They leave this last section to the brave or foolhardy. A rainbow springs from the base of the falls. This happens only when the sun strikes the mist at just the right angle. What a truly magical place. Our next adventure begins in the Amish country of rural Pennsylvania and carries to the Shenandoah Valley's Skyline Drive in Virginia. Rolling through the charming hilly countryside of central Pennsylvania, you'll discover small farms set in towns with names like Lancaster, Bird in Hand, and Paradise. But slow down to share the road with a remarkable sight: a horse and buggy. This is the heart of Amish country, where the people follow simple, peaceful lives in accordance with the teachings of the New Testament. Here, horsepower is just that, and black-smocked farmers till the land much as their ancestors did in the early 1700s when they first settled in America from Europe. They forsake modern equipment signifying their rejection of the material world. But hard work makes the Amish some of the world's most productive farmers. While the men are famed for the bounty of their harvest, few can rival the Amish women for the quality of their handiwork. Quilts decorate a farm wife's clothesline. Each of these creations is unique to its designer, like a signature in fabric and stitching. Farther down the road, a little stand sells homemade goods. Relishes, jams, and jellies, all made by hand from recipes that go back to the old world. Amish craftsmanship is hardly confined to food, though. Even the simplest of Amish crafts has a spiritual dimension. They take the biblical commandment against graven images literally. Even dolls don't have human faces. This is a simpler way of life, regulated by the rise and fall of the sun and the turning of the seasons. But it's time to set off to another place renowned for its rich farmland, the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia and its famous Skyline Drive. The Shenandoah National Park surrounds this route with its winding roads lined by towering trees. Skyline Drive provides 75 scenic overviews. At one, a vista of gentle green slopes opens up, affording a gorgeous view. This wasn't always the case. Until 1935, when the park was established, farmers and loggers owned this land, and the hillsides were once covered in fields and stumps. But the Park Service has left its own mark on the land with the engineering wonders of Skyline Drive. Mary's Rock Tunnel, built in 1932, bores through 600 feet of bedrock. The region abounds with battlegrounds where Civil War enthusiasts relive the past. During the Civil War, Union and Confederate troops swept back and forth through the Shenandoah in battles that literally pitched brother against brother. Confederate General Stonewall Jackson repeatedly outwitted and outmaneuvered his Union adversaries in the Shenandoah Campaign of 1862. Today, the people reenacting Jackson's great victories, such as Front Royal, Cross Keys, and Port Republic, take pride in duplicating every detail of the historic clashes. After the roar of musket and cannon fire, it's a nice break to get back on the road and into the quiet of Skyline Drive. Big Meadows is a great place to pull over and relax. Its 123 acres of unforested land allows wildflowers to flourish. This section of the park was cleared by Native Americans more than 200 years ago. Today, though, the forest is slowly restaking its claim to the land. From a placid pool at a valley bottom, you can follow a stream up to its source. The higher it rises, the quicker the water seems to drop, creating a frothy brew in the eddies below. Then, where the underbrush yields and a meadow edges the creek, a lone doe appears. White-tailed deer prefer a habitat of woods and thickets interspersed with meadows, making this quiet grove an idyllic spot to graze. It's a peaceful scene where even two mature bucks only seem to go through the motions of jousting. When the deer meander back into the thickets, it's time to head back down to the car. One last look at this wondrous landscape, then on to the next stage of our trip. This drive starts on the outer banks of the United States at Chincoteague and Assateague Islands in Virginia, then points us south and west along the Blue Ridge Parkway. Along the marshy lands that fringe Maryland and Virginia's eastern shore, it's hard to tell where the Atlantic Ocean ends and solid earth begins. Roaming wild on these untamed islands are animals that belong to neither the land nor the sea. They are the ponies of Chincoteague and Assateague Islands. Local lore holds that these beautiful animals were born of the sea, that they swam to shore from a shipwrecked Spanish galleon in the 1500s. Once here, they made this mystical land their home. But once a year, their idyllic island life is suddenly transformed. Chincoteague is a community that still makes its living from the ocean. But it's the ponies that capture the imagination of visitors. Every July, locals hold the world-famous Chincoteague pony penning and swim. The wild ponies have just been rounded up. "50 years ago, the classic children's book Misty of Chincoteague by Marguerite Henry portrayed the lives and adventures of these graceful animals. In a ritual that goes back generations, the volunteer fire department has penned the ponies on the Assateague side and will soon swim them over to Chincoteague. There, some of the newborn foals will be auctioned off to keep the herd size at 150, so it won't overgraze the fragile island. Low tide arrives. The volunteer firemen gathered the ponies on the mudflats of Assateague. From the Chincoteague side, you can get a front-row view to a magical event, the pony swim. The ponies make the 100-yard swim in about 10 minutes. On the Chincoteague shore, the ponies rest for an hour. Then they're off again, this time in a parade. Everyone, including the ponies, seems to be having a grand time. The ponies are led into the town's carnival grounds safe and sound after their adventurous morning. Tomorrow after the auction, the ponies will return to Assateague. Where they'll resume the cycle of life that's as regular and mysterious as the seasons. The road leads west for the next leg of the trip. Crossing through much of Virginia, the tidewater gives way to the Piedmont, and then mountains appear ahead. In western Virginia stands a fantastic place where a stream has tunneled through the stone for 200 million years, leaving a span called Natural Bridge. 215 feet high, Natural Bridge is so spectacular, Thomas Jefferson acquired it and often visited. Before him, the Monacan tribe held it sacred as the Bridge of God. Back in the car, it's time to head to the nearby Blue Ridge Parkway, named for the blue hue of its peaks. Passing vistas of steep slopes that give way to misty hollows, the road tunnels through mountains, and pushes on into the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. These are some of the highest mountains east of the Mississippi River and are called the Smokies because of the thick mist that often covers them. This is one of the wildest spots in the American East, so don't be surprised to spot a bear or two. Only 200 years ago, this was America's frontier. Back then, hardy pioneers settled the mountain vales, hewing log cabins from the surrounding forest. This white clapboard church testifies to the bedrock faith of the mountain folk. The first settlers came from Scotland and Germany, seeking freedom and land to call their own. And North Carolina's isolated valleys suited their independent ways. They preferred to rely only on themselves and learned the skills needed for self-sufficiency. Today, their descendants carry on many of the traditional ways. The North Carolina hills are famous for their weavers, some of whom, like this artist, shear and spin their own wool. And these birds are carved by hand by artists who learned their trade at the feet of fathers and grandmothers. But the craft these hills are most renowned for is music. Bluegrass is known as the high, lonesome sound, a perfect match for the landscape. No matter the occasion, there's a better than even chance that some of the guests will be ready to take up an instrument and pick out a traditional tune. With the music still playing, it's time to return to the car and wish this wonderful place a fond farewell. No tour of America would be complete without a drive along the mighty Mississippi River. Starting at Hannibal, Missouri, our journey now follows the river south to Natchez, Mississippi. The streets of Hannibal, Missouri are where Samuel Clemens, later known as Mark Twain, ran wild as a child. In Twain's youth in the 1840s, Hannibal was a frontier town on the Mississippi River. And it's hard to imagine a writer who embodied the spirit of early America more. The Mark Twain Museum is a great place to learn about life in the 1840s and how Twain's youth shaped his later writing. His famous characters, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, were formed from an amalgam of boyhood friends. But of Twain's many memories, the ones that stand out above all others revolve around paddle steamboats. One of Twain's favorite jobs was as a pilot's assistant, and he even took his pen name from the call Mark Twain, used on these boats to signal safe water. With a ride on the Mississippi Queen, it's easy to see why Twain loved the river so much. Paddle boats still ply the river much as the ones Twain piloted, and the sound of their steam whistles still thrills today. Back on shore, the road follows the river south. Stretches of the Mississippi River seem as untamed as they were 150 years ago. The road carries on to the deep south, to where cotton was once king, Natchez, Mississippi. Some of the largest antebellum mansions in the South were built in this region. The houses are so grand, they even have names of their own, such as Dunleith. This mansion is a marvel from every angle, its facade covered in pillared porches. Behind these mansions, you'll find reminders of the work it took to keep these plantations functioning. Today, at Rosalie, it's not unusual to come across Southern belles reenacting the past. Or to find a fleeting moment that seems to evoke the storied histories of these great mansions. Back at the river, at the end of a long day, the lingering light of sunset seems to caress the mighty Mississippi. Morning starts in Georgia, where the route travels from genteel savanna to the wilds of the Okefenokee Swamp. The crashing surf and endless stretches of pristine beach north of Savannah serve as the perfect starting point for the next adventure. On the city's waterfront stands an unusual sight. This is a monument to Florence Martis. Local legend holds that when she was 18, Martis fell in love with a sailor who went to sea and never returned. Martis spent almost every day for 44 years waving and greeting to passing ships, welcoming sailors to Savannah. It comes as no surprise that the citizens of Savannah chose to immortalize Martis. Her hometown is the very essence of Southern hospitality. Elegant streets lead to gorgeous, welcoming fountains. But park the car. This is a city best viewed on foot. Like the Spanish moss that clings to its trees, history drapes Savannah's lanes. Founded in 1733, Savannah is the oldest English settlement in Georgia. Its name is likely a derivative of the local Native American tribe's title, the Shawnee. This was one of the first planned cities in America. Today, every corner still holds one classic treasure after another. But from these genteel byways of Savannah, the road carries on to wilder places. Outside of Savannah, pull over to savor some of the state's famed produce: Georgia peanuts, and of course, its unrivaled peaches. Then it's off to a place where it's eat or be eaten. This is the Okefenokee. The largest swamp in North America, covering over 600 square miles. The name Okefenokee comes from the Native American words meaning land of the trembling earth. Peat deposits on the swamp's floor are so unstable, trees and bushes can quiver when people walk past. But the slow-moving waters are an ideal home for wildlife. Since the 1850s, trappers and hunters have used the few pieces of solid ground here to fish and hunt. And some are still at it. Tannic acid released from decaying vegetation turns the water this tea color. At the end of the day, it's time to travel from the moss-covered stretches of Georgia to a realm yet further south. "1,600 miles from Maine, where this journey started, the next and last adventure begins. It steers south from the coast of Florida to Key Largo, and then on to Key West. At the very tip of the Florida Peninsula stands one of the great man-made wonders of the world, the Overseas Highway. This engineering marvel contains 42 bridges and runs for 127 miles, connecting the sun-drenched islands known as the Florida Keys. Key Largo is a must for nature lovers. The John Pennekamp Coral Reef State Park is America's first undersea park. You can take a tour on a glass-bottom boat to the multicolored coral reefs to watch the sights in comfort. Or you can experience the beauty of the park from even closer up by renting a dive boat and speeding out to the coral reef. The waters are so clear, you can literally see the bottom. The coral reef is a living, moving wonderland. Fish dart in and out of the graceful, waving coral, and a school of silver flashes past. This reef contains an amazing diversity of life, with some 500 species of fish, all depending on the health of these fragile corals. But the most unexpected and supernatural scene appears from out of the blue. This is Christ of the Deep, a statue anchored to the ocean floor. Now, bleached and weathered by the elements, this 9-foot bronze monument was placed here in 1965 to inspire those who work and play on the reef, as well as comfort those who've lost loved ones at sea. Back in the car, it's hard to imagine these waters as anything but peaceful and welcoming. But pirate dens once dotted the coast, and other locals called wreckers made a good living preying on ships that foundered on the reefs up until the end of the 19th century. Passing through mangrove swamps, it feels like a foreign land, and no wonder. Some of these islands lie closer to Havana, Cuba, than to Miami. You can press along the overseas highway until there's practically nowhere left to drive. This is Key West, one of America's most colorful towns. A great place to get out of the car and explore. Sloppy Joe's was a favorite watering hole for Ernest Hemingway. And don't be surprised if a Hemingway look-alike nonchalantly strolls right past. Hemingway lived here, drawn to Key West by its wild spirit and tropical beauty. Here he felt free among the town's offbeat personalities and found inspiration in the island's distinct character. A short drive away is another sort of refuge. In a neighborhood called the Truman Annex stands the Little White House. Harry Truman spent 175 days of his presidency on Key West among these shaded porches and quiet corners. This was his oasis. Key West is the perfect place to end this driving adventure. We have followed the call of the sea all the way to the sun-soaked Florida Keys. This fiery display produces a breathtaking finale for our driving tour of America's spectacular East Coast.